She was barely 10 years old, small, quiet, and unaware of the weight destiny was about to place on her shoulders, when the Pontifex Maximus lifted his hand toward her. In that single gesture, her childhood ended forever. The murmurs of the crowd faded, and every eye turned to the little girl who had just been chosen as the next Vestal Virgin. She had not been selected for her family's wealth, or for ambition, or for anything she had done. She was chosen for something much heavier: purity, fate, and Rome's unshakable belief that certain children were born to serve the sacred. For the Romans, giving up a daughter was not a simple religious offering. It was a sacrifice of unimaginable emotional cost. The girl they surrendered would no longer belong to her parents. She would belong to the goddess Vesta, to the state, and to the eternal heartbeat of Rome itself. The ceremony that marked this transformation was both holy and chilling. Only a very specific kind of child could be chosen, between 6 and 10 years old, the daughter of 2 living Roman citizens, untouched by scandal, and born from a lawful marriage. She had to be physically perfect, a symbol of the purity Rome demanded from those who would guard its most sacred flame. Families watched in silence as their daughters stood in a line, waiting for the Pontifex Maximus, Rome's highest priest, to choose one. Sometimes the choice was made by drawing lots, other times by direct command. But however she was chosen, the reaction of her parents was rarely joy. Many wept, some prayed. A few tried to hide their grief, knowing there was no refusing Rome's call. Once selected, the girl was taken away immediately. No long goodbyes, no second chances. She crossed the Sacra Via, the sacred road, for the final time as an ordinary Roman child. From this moment forward, every breath she took, every step she walked, belonged to the goddess. Plutarch writes that King Numa Pompilius had created the Order of the Vestals to protect Rome's sacred fire, a flame that symbolized the eternal life of the city. These girls were not simply performing rituals. They were living symbols of Rome's moral strength. Their success brought honor, their failure could bring disaster. The child was taken to the Atrium Vestae, the house of the Vestals, beside the Temple of Vesta in the Roman Forum. There, under constant supervision, her life was divided into 3 decades, 10 years of learning, 10 years of service, and 10 years of teaching the next generation. She would learn rituals, laws, and the delicate practices that kept Rome's sacred fire burning day and night. Her responsibilities were not just sacred, they were political. As long as the flame burned, Rome lived. As long as the Vestal remained pure, the city saw itself as protected. Her chastity was more than a vow. It was a symbol of the state's moral foundation. The chains that bound her were not iron, but expectation, law, and fear. Once chosen, she could never return home, never use her birth name again, never reclaim the life she had lived before. She had become something else entirely: an icon, an ideal, a living embodiment of Rome's virtue. But behind all the reverence and respect lay a darker truth. Rome adored its Vestals only as long as they were perfect. One mistake, one misstep, could turn worship into wrath. The strictest rule of all was the vow of chastity. For 30 years, no man could touch her. No marriage, no love, no family of her own. This was not merely a spiritual requirement, it was a national law. Her purity symbolized Rome's purity. If she broke that vow, the consequences were not just personal, they were catastrophic. Rome believed her impurity could endanger the entire city. And Rome did not forgive. The laws were harsher than any dungeon, and the punishments darker than any myth. Harsh justice. Rome's brutal discipline. She was sacred, yet never safe. Draped in ceremonial white and revered by the citizens of Rome, the Vestal Virgin walked a knife-edge between divine honor and mortal peril. Her life was devoted entirely to sacred duty, yet every heartbeat carried the weight of Roman law. Unforgiving, absolute, and inescapable. Publicly adored, she was privately scrutinized. Every glance, every word, every gesture was a measure of her virtue. One misstep, and that sanctity could become her doom. The Vestals were bound by 3 iron laws: perpetual virginity, unwavering obedience, and absolute guardianship of the sacred flame. To break any of these was to invite consequences swift, merciless, and meticulously ritualized. If the eternal fire in Vesta's temple ever went out, it was no mere accident. It was a dire omen, a crack in the foundations of Rome itself. The chief Vestal might be scourged, sometimes by the Pontifex Maximus himself, but always in secret, away from public eyes. This punishment was not symbolic, it was calculated, brutal, and conducted in darkness to protect the sanctity of the woman, even as she endured humiliation and pain. Ancient sources describe these punishments: when the sacred fire faltered, sacred vessels might be struck with rods, yet never publicly, and never in a manner that exposed her fully. Rome demanded ritual dignity even as it inflicted suffering. Beyond physical torment, the psychological isolation was relentless. For 3 decades, a Vestal's life was confined to the Atrium Vesta, a secluded complex in the heart of the Roman Forum. She was constantly watched. She could not speak freely with men. The smallest hint of impropriety could trigger a full investigation by the College of Pontiffs. And once accused, a Vestal's chance for defense was almost non-existent. In Rome, innocence was not presumed. To serve as a Vestal was not freedom, it was a gilded prison. She was adored, yet chained by laws more unyielding than iron. And when she was deemed to have broken the most sacred of vows, Rome's justice revealed its darkest face. The crime was called incestum, a violation of Vesta's purity. The punishment was chilling in its solemnity: burial alive. There were no blades, no spilling of holy blood. Instead, the condemned were entombed alive, a ritual designed to uphold the sanctity of both the goddess and the state while extinguishing a life. One of the most harrowing recorded examples occurred in 216 BCE. 2 Vestals, Opimia and Floronia, were accused of incestum by the Pontifical College. Their trial was secret, their defense lost to history. Once judged guilty, their fates were sealed. One was buried alive, the other took her own life. The ritual began with profound silence, no cries, no protests. Draped in white, veiled, and barefoot, the condemned walked through the Roman Forum in a solemn procession. Like a bride to her wedding, yet this was no union. It was a funeral. They stopped at the Campus Celeratus, the field of the wicked beyond the Colline Gate. There lay a prepared chamber, carved into the earth, containing only a bed, a lamp, bread and milk, a grim simulacrum of life, leaving the illusion that her death was left to the gods, not mandated by the state. The chamber was sealed with earth and stone. She vanished forever. No cries, no record of final breath. Rome did not call it execution, but divine judgment. The city's most revered women had become vessels of both devotion and terror. A stark reminder that in Rome, honor and horror were inseparable.
By providing her with bread, water, and a flickering lamp, Rome could claim that she was merely imprisoned, not executed. But there was no escape, no hope of rescue, no legal appeal. Once she descended into that narrow earthen tomb, her air would run out, and with it, her life. In that silence, Rome demonstrated its capacity to enshrine brutality under the guise of virtue. Death was deliberate, but invisible. There was no public spectacle, no crowd to witness her fate. That was the purpose. Silence itself became a tool, as powerful as the earth that sealed her in, erasing her from memory, stripping away her name, her identity, her very existence. The story of Rome's Vestal Virgins exposes a civilization willing to sanctify innocence, while punishing imperfection with merciless precision. These women were revered, celebrated as divine symbols of the city's purity and moral strength. Yet the moment they were accused of wrongdoing, that reverence evaporated, leaving them entirely at the mercy of the state, buried beneath the soil. They were buried beneath the weight of an empire that valued power and ritual over compassion and life. In the shadow of these rituals, we are forced to ask ourselves, what does a society lose when it sacrifices humanity for the illusion of purity? What price is paid when law and religion wield the power to destroy life in the name of virtue? As Thucydides once observed, the strong do what they can, and the weak suffer what they must. The Vestals lived on at the intersection of faith, law, and the inexorable demands of power. Their stories remain a chilling reminder of the cost of perfection and the fragility of human dignity under the weight of empire.